One of my favorite things lately is having the opportunity to chit chat with other homeschoolers over the phone. These homeschool moms trust me with their phone number, and we're able to chat for half an hour, sometimes up to an hour, where we are diving into specifics inside their homeschooling environment. I want you to know that that's available to you too. So if you are interested in a phone chat with me, please say so below and let's connect. I was chatting with one of the homeschool moms inside Homeschooling with Secret Sauce this past week, and she was wrestling with overwhelm with the fact that her kids were little and she didn't quite know what she was supposed to do with them. And by the end of the phone call, we were both so encouraged because with young kids, I need you to understand this. Okay, 25 years later, gray hair, kids that are thriving in life, you don't have to be in a hurry. I need you to remember that it's 2022. When I was a little girl, I remember stopping on the way to the beach to visit my dad. He was at work, and we went inside to say, Daddy, 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 we're on our way to the beach. And he gave us a tour of his office place. And we walked in and into this room that was wall to wall computers. Just like you see in that old movie War Games, computers were huge when I was little and literally took up this amazing space. It was the company where he was actually working with the guy that went on to invent the Intel chip. That kind of tells you how old I am. So anyway, here it was back in the boonies or back in the dark ages, and computers were the size of rooms. Today, everybody that you know, I left mine, everybody that you know is carrying a smartphone, a supercomputer that's more powerful than that room that I was in when I was a little girl. And I want you to just pause and consider that for a second. Everybody has access to a supercomputer. So what you teach your kids is not as important as teaching them how to learn. I'm going to say that again. What you teach your kids is not as important as teaching them how to learn, because they can find out anything this fast. Is boom, this fast. My son told me the other day, I was bored. And I was always wondering, how do gasoline pumps work? He's like, Mom, so I went and I did some research, and this is how they work. I knew it couldn't be electrical because gas plus electricity equals. And I sat there thinking, this kid loves to learn. And so he leans into his questions, and your kids need to do this as well. Now, if they're little, 10 and under, if all you did for the next couple years was read a lot, read varying types of material, diving into stories, looking at nonfiction, fiction, comic books, all these things, and you just fall in love with story, and you practice your math every single day, your kids are going to absorb vocabulary, ideas, creativity, and they're going to fall in love with information. They're going to fall in love with learning. So if your kids are little, I'm going to encourage you, however much you read aloud to them right now, double or triple it for the next couple years. Just read and read and read. And when you get to an exciting spot in a story, close the book and put it down. Your goal is to leave your kids like this. Wait, please read me more. Mommy, please read to me more. You want to leave them hungry for more. We get so tripped up by what we're supposed to teach our kids. What about trigonometry? What about essays? What about spelling and grammar? And what about the historical timeline? And what about the scientific method? And all the things. And we peek over at the other homeschool pages, and we peek over at our homeschooling besties, and we see the things that they're creating, and we start to panic like, oh my gosh, my kids are going to be so messed up by the time I'm done teaching them. But homeschooling's a marathon, and I know that that is cliche. It's this long journey. And if at the end your kids leave the home and they love to read, and they fully know how they learn, right? What kinds of students are they? Do they need to see things visually? Do they need to brainstorm in word webbing and mind mapping? Do they need to hear things over and over and over again? Do they need to dance it out? Do they need to sing it out? Do they need to doodle it out? How do they learn? And then if they also know, well, how do you find out information? You don't just Google and then take that first hit as fact, right? So by the time they leave home, they need to know how to vet their sources. They need to know, well, how do you tell if it's real or if it's fake? How do you know if it's a valid source or an invalid source? By the time they graduate high school, where do they find help for information? Where do they find help when they stumble? I have a kid right now taking an astronomy class that is ridiculously dumb, and I say that not because astronomy's not dumb. I mean, astronomy's not dumb, but the class, it's a college class and it's put together in a way that is ridiculously difficult for a subject that should not be that difficult. And so the life lesson that he is learning right now is, well, how do I find the information that I need? How do I dig through the resources? Because his professor is not available and not helpful. And so that's a problem. But that's a real world problem. That's a life challenge. So lean in to reading so much more. And if you don't love to read aloud, or if, like me, anytime I sat down to read to my kids when they were young, I would fall asleep like 100% of the time. So I would read aloud and I'd stand while the kids were eating lunch, or we would uh, just consume audiobooks. Audiobooks count. And remember that audiobooks count. There's also read aloud libraries online where you can click and listen to stories. What's that old one called? The Reading Rainbow is an excellent resource for reading aloud. Marinate your kids in story. Don't worry about when they're in the third grade whether or not they can diagram sentences or write a properly formatted essay, or if they know the boiling point of water. All these things are super important. They really are. But if you take the time to just lean into your kids' heart and character, and you are digesting stories and stopping when they're excited, stopping when the kids are like hungry for more, and then doing something together that's valuable, what you end up doing is cultivating the soil of their imagination, cultivating the soil of their hearts. And then you equip them over time. Well, how do you find information on something that you don't know anything about? Well, what if you don't know how to spell mnemonic? How do you find out about memory tips and tricks? And then you do this together, side by side. You learn together. You don't even need a high school diploma to homeschool your kids well. You don't need a college degree to teach your kids well. Teaching from a curriculum point of view, a standards point of view, a lesson plan point of view, gives you a plan. It gives you a map, but it doesn't necessarily get you to where you want to be. Instead, homeschool through the lens of, by the time my kids graduate from high school, they're going to be kind. They're going to be helpful. They're going to be responsible. They're going to be diligent. They're going to know their basic math facts inside and out, and they are going to love to read. They're going to love story, and they're going to chase curiosity, right? Doesn't that sound fantastic? I can tell you, after over 25 years of homeschooling, with all 5 of my kids being delayed readers, judge me, all 5 of them were delayed readers. Some of them couldn't even hold a pencil right until they were like 10 or 12. One of them didn't read till he was 10. They were delayed walkers, except the first one, who was kamikaze on feet. They were delayed walkers, delayed talkers, delayed readers. If they took standardized tests, they created bubble patterns on the tests rather than actually completing the test itself. And yet now they're almost all graduated from high school. I've got one more in high school. 4 completed high school with their associate's degree complete. Like big flippin' deal, right? Wow, Bekki, that's good for you. These were delayed readers. These were delayed students. What did we do? We leaned into character and we leaned into story and we read to them and we marinated them with ideas and we entered in to what it is they were interested in the books, right? Right now, I'm currently reading my 4th son's favorite book, Martin the Warrior, in the Redwall series, and it's not my favorite book. It's not. But why am I reading it? Because it's important to him. And I want to have the conversation that he wants to have with me on the other side of the story. And so we lean into books, we lean into ideas, we lean into reading, and it opens up our kids' imaginations and it connects us relationally so that when life gets hard, because it will, when those hormones hit like a tidal wave, we have a foundation to stand on. And it's not page 47 of our history book or our language arts curriculum. It's these stories where we can say, hey, remember that book that we read and that character went through this thing, and how we have things that we can connect with that are not each other. They're ways to connect that are safer. They're heart connections with our kids. So if your kids are young, please double, triple how much time you're reading to them. If your kids learned to read and you stopped reading aloud, repent. Start reading aloud right now until they leave the house. For as long as you both shall live, read aloud to your kids. Why? Because stories are a way to share life and to make connections. They're kind of where the inside jokes come from. They're where those secret vocabulary cues come from. But they're also a way to make sure that your kids aren't missing things. You are reading stories and you are exposing them to language and ideas that they might not pick on their own. And it does so much for their writing ability and their creativity. Just last week or the week before, my husband was talking about fine-tuning his writing at work. And because we're all lifelong learners. And so he says things like that out loud so that it's a model for the boys, that just because you graduate, just because you have kids, just because you're gray, just because you're a professional doesn't mean that you stop learning. In fact, you always lean into your craft. So he was talking about fine-tuning his professional writing skills. And our youngest says, you know what you need to do, Dad? You need to find authors that are in your field that write things that are like delicious, and you need to read those things over and over again, because then the words and the ideas become part of you and it will come out in your writing. This came out of my 17-year-old's mouth. Why? Not because he's brilliant, even though he is. Not because he's brilliant, but because he's heard it over and over and over again. We can be in such a rush to teach our kids to read independently so they can go in the corner and read, and we can get on with our life. And that's a mistake. Instead, lean into spending that time with our kids and diving deep into reading with them until they leave home. I have 3 that have now moved, and they're in that part of their life where they're independent. And I miss the connection time of reading a story and then having conversations about it. And so much so that I'm now reaching forward or I guess I'm reaching into the past, and I'm starting to read some of their favorite stories from when they were in middle school and high school, so that I have that connection again with them, where I can say, oh, I just finished reading remember that old book that it's a connection. So read aloud to your kids. If they love to read, and they can vet information, then over time, they will develop the skills so that they can learn everything that they need to know. You have to remember that everybody's walking around with a supercomputer in their hand. And my husband is always telling our boys now, with 6 weeks of concentrated study, you can become proficient in almost any topic out there. So don't let what you don't know hold you back. Instead, dig in and get busy reading from the people that are successful doing whatever it is that you want to do. And you will glean that experience and the expertise needed in order for you to thrive. And so do that with your kids. Read aloud to them. If they're reading and they no longer sit next to you, put an audiobook on when you're in the car, put an audiobook on when you're making dinner, or when you are getting ready for school in the morning or right before bedtime. So especially if they're resistant to you actually reading aloud. And just an audiobook is a great way to captivate them. So if you need ideas for things that they can read, please ask, because all the homeschool moms in this corner of the internet are amazing, and they have an incredible amount of knowledge and resources of things that have worked for their own kids. And I think that's it. Have a wonderful day. Find a good book and start reading it today to your kids, and stop and close it when it gets to an exciting spot so that you can leave them hungry for more.